You don't need clarity. The trouble with people wanting clarity is it stops them moving at all. But you get clarity through action, not through inaction. Courage is much more important than confidence. If I want to be confident, it requires me to start with courage, and the confidence will emerge. You can't, everyone's wanting to click their fingers and be confident. It's bullshit. You can't, if it's that easy, everyone will just be confident. It's not about that. The input is courage.
Welcome to Chapters, where each week we discuss the careers of former athletes and how they navigated the journey from sport to their career beyond professional sports. I'm your host Craig Walsh, and on today's episode is my guest Callum Wilson. Callum is an executive coach who aims to connect with his clients so they can create deep happiness and high performance. He also played professional rugby in the UK and France, and we discussed the nuances of playing rugby in France in comparison to England and the liberating impact on his playing style. As well as this, we discussed Callum's transition from athlete to life coach during the lockdown. We also spoke about the difficulty of ending his rugby career due to injury, his selective coaching approach, and the joy of contributing meaningfully and authentically with other people. I think this is a really great episode for anyone out there who may be struggling or grappling with some elements of identity. Callum really puts some areas into perspective of who we are as people. And after speaking with Cal, I absolutely understand the benefits of life coaching or exec coaching that maybe I didn't understand before. Thanks again to Callum, and you can find all the info in the episode notes below. So here we go. Here's my conversation with Callum Wilson.
Probably not very safe. Well, it's definitely not safe, but we were doing that, definitely.
And parents must have been happy you were active.
Yeah, I remember my mum, an early thought that her or my auntie had was that I used to just run straight into things as a kid, and I used to love picking things up. So I think my mum thought I was going to be world's strongest man. Like she's like that. She joked around that. I was really interested in strength and physicality. As I said, I used to run straight into things instead of around them. So I think it was probably quite natural to them. But I mean, it probably wasn't a relief that I played, because it's just so natural for me to always be playing sport. My brother the same, always.
Parents sporty as well?
Yes and no. My mum is never played. She's not a competitive person, but she gyms like 4 times a week. She walks probably more than me, and so she's probably walking 15 to 20,000 steps a day.
Wow.
Gymming all the time. My dad, he had really bad knees at school, which meant that he didn't do traditional sports, but he ended up winning the British Nationals in sailing. And he also shot for the UK, pistol for the UK. And I think they came 4th in the World Championship as a team. So I'd say he's like never exercised, but he does have sport in him, and he still shoots now. So he's a very, very good shooter. Mum's obviously, and my granddad was a very good rugby player. He had played a couple of games for Leicester Tigers, I think, and they are the RAF when that was actually like the best the best teams around. So and he played for a couple of other teams. So he was really rugby orientated.
Was he in your ear, kind of like, oh, you know, trying to push you down that kind? You could be. There's something here for you.
I never felt pushed in my life by my parents, which I'm really grateful for. And it actually brings up emotion. Think about that, how many kids get pushed. But for me, it was always like, what do you want to do? And we'll go and do it. My dad wasn't necessarily interested in the sports that I liked, but he'd always find a way to support that. So my granddad knew that I liked rugby, and we'd go and do lots of training and extra stuff, but I didn't feel pushed. I think push is a really bad energy. I think pull is a great energy. And I always felt pulled toward things and then supported to what I was pulled forward to.
Yeah. There was an energy of just kind of that would, you know, you felt like, yeah, that's my path. I'm going to go down that way.
Yeah. I don't know whether my parents thought about this or not, but I definitely felt very free to follow self-interest.
That's interesting, because this is something I'm trying to do with my kids, is to get them more involved in not necessarily sports, but just being active. And I have to word it certain ways, especially for my boy, to say, what do you like what would you like to do, or what should we do, rather than he's just not interested in team sports. So I love team sports. I played everything when I was young. Anything that I could play, I would try. But he wants to maybe go climbing, or he wants to go biking. So there's these different ways. And my daughter just dances all the time. So it's interesting you say that. It's making me think I have to word it differently. You know, I have to communicate differently with them to not feel like I'm forcing them down this road of, I did this when I was young, so therefore this would help you. It's not the same, is it?
Well, here's what I'd say to that. And I did listen, as I said, to your last podcast with Ben, and I did think about a couple of what I might have added to certain topics. And one thing that I wrote down was, well, there's two. Aside from superficial freedom, such as not being behind bars and in chains, freedom is the choice to want, and freedom is a choice to move to want and not need. And so should and have, this is needy language of force. And it's complete opposite of exercising freedom. So I believe in a life of freedom, which means getting to choose what you want and living as absolutely as much of my life in freedom in the land of want, not need. And the other thing about when you exercise your freedom, you fall into your self-interest, things that you feel passionate about. But that is a really important part of humanity. The reason why humans are top of the food chain, so to speak, is because of, I'm really interested in Adlerian psychology or philosophy, and Adler makes a really amazing point. Most animals all do exactly the same thing. Like they all go and do the same tasks, hunt, provide nesting and security and whatever. Most animals all do the same thing. Whereas humans, because Ben writes and you're a father and I'm a coach and my brother is in tech, because we don't all do the same things, as a community, it enables us to do a huge range of things and do them. And if we follow self-interest in passion, we naturally divide ourselves beautifully. And the quality, if we follow self-interest and passion, that we deliver as a result of enjoying, i.e. expressing our freedom, is very, very high. So self-interest is an important part of humanity, and it's what drives the quality of that diversity of tasks. I'm curious to hear what you hear in that. Maybe I didn't explain that very clearly, or...
Well, yeah, if you can just explain, how would that relate to what I just said about offering these different opportunities for him? Can you just...
How did that link? Well, because humans are able to, I forget the exact term, but divide labor. Because we're able to divide labor, that's what helps us function. And the best scenario of that is that we divide naturally through our self-interest, not through being pigeonholed or forced through and not having freedom. So if we exercise our freedom, we naturally follow self-interest, and that is the best division of labor for humanity. Imagine that everyone is doing what they want as much as possible. So the reason why I said it in reference to your son is because I think one of the most important things in terms of deciding where you go is exercising freedom, because self-interest is important not just for your son but for everyone.
Coaching, kind of analysing of what I've said and listening to Ben's podcast, and I really like that you've done that. Where did this interest come from, this kind of identity of being a rugby player, to then how did you get into this side of your life of, I like this coaching element?
I think it's, so you're interested in athletes transitioning. And if you had asked, like there was that question of that you asked Ben at the start of the podcast with Ben, and I'll refer to it so that people that haven't listened to that one can, you said, what was your experience like? And then there was a moment where Ben referred to the feeling that the Real Madrid player had said, it's like death. Right. So and then and then Craig, you just said something about identity, and the most important thing for me is absolutely, as an athlete, to understand that you are not what you do, and no human is. That is the most fundamental thing, and it's evidential through self-inquiry. So, did I die when I stopped playing rugby? No. Was I alive before I started playing rugby? So could you say, if you can strip this thing from me or add it to me, could you say that is what I am essentially? And the answer is obviously no. So I am not a rugby player. Rugby is something that I do. That the reason why that Real Madrid bloke referred to death is because it literally felt from an identity point of view, I am this thing, and it is like dying. And I don't believe in that, because it doesn't align with what I know to be true. The truth is that whether Callum plays rugby or not, I'm still me.
I mean, that's something, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I try and do this podcast I'm asking that question about identity because I want other people to hear that needs to be kind of expelled, this idea of you are just a rugby player, you're just a footballer, this thing of retiring. I don't like the word retire, because it's just a different part of your life. After you've finished doing something, that's all it is, and you're then going on to the next thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And you were asking me about that shift from rugby to coaching. When I think about gifts, one thing that I've always enjoyed and felt capable at, and it's happened in friendships naturally, is to be in deep conversations with people and listen and ask questions. I've always been interested in performance and happiness and function, and so it was just natural to me. And so before I'd finished playing rugby, during the lockdown, we couldn't play rugby, and for large parts. And I thought, well, I'd like to develop myself and find something away from rugby potentially. When I got my first professional contract, I spent a couple of sessions with a life coach, who I just thought, I've gone from university into professional sport and I'm going to get loads of help with sport, but I won't, the rest of my being and my life, I haven't got any support, so why wouldn't I look for some? And I didn't have many sessions, but the idea was planted that there are people who can support you throughout your life. And I thought, actually, that feels like a nice, I feel called towards that with what I am good at and what I'm interested in. So it was planted, that seed was planted, and then lockdown came, and I just started contacting every executive coach. I went on Laps, where, or the other one, there's another sport website for transitioning athletes, and I saw a rugby player talk about executive and performance coaching. So I called him up and we spoke, and I thought, oh wow, I don't necessarily like the connotations of life coaching. It's not like how I would describe what I do necessarily, although I have nothing against it. But I thought, okay, there feels like an opening here for me to explore. I started talking to a lot of people, reading a lot of books. And then one day a woman said, well, just start doing it. Like, it's an unregulated
sector
industry. So, but you're not going to get paid. So like, just start, just try it. And I loved it. And because of lockdown, people were extremely available. So I wrapped up, literally hundreds of hours of coaching in a very, very short space of time. I did qualification in executive coaching and started my business while I was still playing, because I knew that would be what I'd like to do, and I would start building it at the same time as rugby. Yeah. It was a natural progression. My career, unlike Ben's, ended in injury, so it was quite abrupt in some ways. But nevertheless, I had a career to fall into. I didn't go through that questioning.
Do you feel you were was it kind of a negative end to your rugby career, or were you kind of positive in the direction you were going when you found this coaching side? Well, some people would be negative, wouldn't they, after ending their rugby or whatever sport with an injury?
Well, there was nothing negative about going into coaching, but that happened before the rugby finished. So there's always been a really positive energy with me around coaching. Rugby is a brain injury, so that ended it. And thing is, when you hurt your brain, you're very aware that of how important that is. It's not like another injury where like I might, we'll try it and do it. When you've got neurologists saying there's scarring on your brain, there's in my case like 10 areas which are normal. Like you're not in that space of like should I, shouldn't I? That felt very binary. Well, it was. No, I literally got my license taken from me by a neurologist. So it's like you can't play. So the intention is to get healthy quickly, or not quickly, but to get healthy. So just focusing for me, it just felt natural to focus on getting my brain right. Coaching is a great career transition if you get injured, because it's so much about perspective, reflection, even like learning about what you truly are as a conscious being is very important. It's something that happens in coaching. If you don't want to identify as a rugby player, it's a very unhealthy identity as I am this, as we spoke about before. What you end up doing when you inquire about yourself is like, oh, wow, I'm really a conscious being. And funny thing, not the funny thing, but I remember talking to a neurologist when they asked me, how do you feel about your brain injury? And I said, well, I'm not my brain. My brain is a tool that I use. So it's just a matter of being aware of the tool. But I'm still me. The tool that I get to use to experience life is different. And the guy laughed, and there's been a lot of research into this. I thought I'd be talking a bit woo-woo-y to this guy who's obviously into matter and the physical world, but he was like, no, I completely understand, and it helps you recover quicker to have this understanding of yourself from brain injuries. It's a bit like you don't feel like low self-worth or like you're doomed when you have a bad hamstring. You just go, well, a damaged hamstring, and now I need to find ways to use it and rehab, and if at the end there's a limitation, then you find another way of using it. It's a bit like that with your brain as well. But it comes from understanding yourself as something more fundamental. A lot of people think they are their brain, for example, or they exist only in their brain, and then they get damaged brain and it's doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, man, like I cried.
Yeah,
for sure. When you've got headaches all 7 days a week, and you wake up feeling drunk or hungover, and you're angry and you don't know what's going on, and you can't remember people's names who you've spent a lot of time with, and you're forgetting shit all the time. It's not all peace, love and joy.
Yeah. How long was the process of seeing improvement?
I still have symptoms now, and that was over 3 years ago. So, but it takes time, and there is irreparable damage. So it's about understanding that the brain's an amazing thing. Neuroplasticity is an amazing thing. So learning about the brain has been really interesting for me. But it did take a while, a couple of years at least, before I felt like I was functioning better. But I still have limitations, man. I don't do certain things. I don't party as much as other people, or drink anywhere near as much. And in some ways, you could say that it's helped me be higher performance, because anything you become aware of, you suddenly learn about, and it helps you. So I'm not here to be gutted about it, although I do understand there is change.
Do you think I'm guessing obviously you started doing the learning about coaching, and that was an avenue you wanted to take around this, that was already happening when you had this injury and when you're dealing with the injury. Didn't that help Obviously, you wanted to have that as a kind of a career, but did it help you personally as well, just learning about being a human, the brain? You're kind of life coaching yourself in a way.
For sure. And I've always had coaching as well. So I've always had other people to help me through. Yeah, 100%. It's like the perfect career in some ways, short of maybe being a neuroscientist and really like knowing the brain like that. I actually think, no, I not all coaching goes into spirituality or whatever, but I do a lot of self-inquiry, and you end up in that conclusion of like, wow, all I really am, like every cell of my body, including the cells of my brain, change. Everything changes. What's the consistent thing that's always there? And it's a sense of myself and awareness of myself. And so that's just, it's not even, I don't even like the term spirituality in terms of, because it's obvious. It's like the only thing that I truly know is that I am me. And that me isn't a physical thing, because everything physically, as I said, changes. So part of coaching often ends up within that. It's a great place to build your life from, understanding what I am is this. Nothing can be added or taken from this thing that I am. It's a perfect place to feel complete and then go off and build a life. Whereas what a lot of people are trying to do when they leave sport is they feel like half of them's been torn away, so they feel incomplete. And then the first steps they take are very compensatory, which are like, oh, I'm incomplete. I need to do a lot of things to be complete again. And then you create an enormous amount of pressure on yourself, because, well, if I'm not good at this, then I'm not worthy, and I'm etc. So yeah, to answer your question, coaching is absolutely perfect for transition. And I'd recommend anyone going through that transition. There are coaches that specifically work with athletes on that thing. So
what will athletes learn about themselves once they realize there is more to life than being an athlete?
Specifically through coaching, or just in general, do you think?
Through coaching, yeah.
So here's what I would imagine might happen if you were to come to me. I think we would spend some time talking, exploring who you are, and stripping away all of these external, divest yourself of all of this, I am this and this and this, and really get back to the truth of who you are. And then I think we would explore self-interest, what passions you have. At that point, we'd also look at your general life purpose, your why. So self-interest and purpose. And then I think we would probably explore contribution. I don't think that our lives are about us. I think that that you're part of nature, that nature, you function within nature, not separate to it. Your ego, your separate self, believes itself to be separate, but when you inquire about anything, you'll know that you came from nature and you'll go back to it, whether you believe in the material world or the spiritual world, whatever. You'll know that you're part of something bigger. And contributing or being in alignment with the us and we, not I and me, is very important for human beings in even realizing who you are. So your best moments in your life will be giving moments. So we would look at using your gifts, your unique strengths, and we would explore that through moments in your life, as well as asking other people. We'd probably discover 1 to 5 of them. That's it. I think I've probably got 3. And then I would look at how I could, because gifts are received, but they're given. So you're given a gift, and then you're there, and then you give it. So looking at the gifts you've been given, how we could best use that to contribute. We won't focus on a taking. We won't focus on the idea of I'm incomplete, I need to take. We'll focus on the idea of I'm whole and complete. What do I want to give from a place of passion and purpose that's in alignment with my gifts? I might look at something like Ikigai, the crossover of these areas.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, a general theme that I would work through you with is probably something like relax, contract, observe. And I'll talk you through that. The relaxation part is we have this temptation that I need to go and find my passion, and that's even your choice. I bet you some of the best moments in your life or the biggest ideas have come from you're just having a shower and an idea pops into your mind. And that
100%.
Whether you believe in God, a higher, something higher, a higher consciousness, or you believe in just nature giving you ideas. And that doesn't come from a state of contraction, squeezing, opening. So we start by relaxing and being open, planning lots of space in your day, doing certain activities that give you inspiration, and just relax. We're open and we listen. So that's the relax part. We feel through that reception what we want to do, and we take action. So that's the contract part. We go and try. We take maybe MVA, minimum viable action, like take an action towards that thing. And then the last part, observe, is to go relax. How do I feel about that? And then go, okay, I like this, I didn't like that, and that felt good. And so it's a very, if you imagine a game, you remember when you were young, someone would hide something in a room, you'd shut your eyes maybe, and you'd move forward and they'd say hotter or colder. Maybe you didn't even shut your eyes. You just move forward and they say hotter or colder. Think about transition like that. Yeah. Like, going to take a step forward and we're going to listen. Is it hotter or colder? And then allow it to emerge. How did that sound to you if we were taking you through transition?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, I know which direction I'm going. Yeah. No, but it's funny you say about, I think I listened to something similar, how you can't be productive by saying, I'm going to sit down for an hour now and be productive. I think study was done where you think you're going to be productive from the first half an hour, was actually when the flow comes in, it's actually after an hour and a half or so. I don't know exactly what it was, but it reminded me of this. It will come when you're in this kind of most comfortable space, and sometimes for me that's when I'm walking the dog and I'm listening to something, but I'm not actually listening.
Yes,
my brain is somewhere else, and I'm this. When people are talking, they're just talking, but I'm thinking of something else, and I have my ideas then, and that's when I need to concentrate and think. Well, I need to. What did you say before? I need to act on that. When I get back, I need to remember that and act on it.
And I'd probably, if I was coaching you right now, which I'm not, I'd probably just pick you up in your language and just say, I want to. I don't want to create pressure around, I need to do this. I want to. I feel inspiration. I want to follow. What you just described is really interesting in terms of these thoughts emerging when you're not conscious to them. It's like, how often do you, we're like, oh, who's that guy that played for Pompey, tall guy, black guy, and then 2 weeks later you text me and you're like, Carnu. I know that you're a Pompey fan, but Carnu. And you were probably doing the dishes and Carnu came to your mind, because we tend to use the front of our minds, our prefrontal cortex, but actually when we start to surrender a bit more and relax, your subconscious mind does a lot of work for you in the background. It's problem solving if you give it space. In Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, there's the quote by Robert Henry, which says, our job is not to create art, it's to be in this state in which art is inevitable. And it's that you're not there to find your purpose, be in the state, or your next career, be in the state in which your career will be inevitable. It will find its way through, because and so you were talking about doing things, and then that allowing your mind to come up with your subconscious mind, and going for a quick walk, not so quick enough you have to think about walking a little bit and you're a little bit sweaty, not so like a run where you're like, you have to really concentrate on running, but not so slow that you don't have to think about it, but you're just distracting the front of your mind enough. That's the perfect space for inspiration, where you're just distracted enough in the front of your mind often. The sweet spot. The Comfort Crisis by Michael Issa, he talks about giving yourself space and relaxation, and he talks about that you need to allow your mind to wander. You need to allow it to switch off in order to receive. And then he also talked about one of the reasons to not sit and consume and try, because often all you're doing is imitating other people when you're trying. You're like looking around. When you look around for the idea to come to you, without realizing it, quite often all you're doing is consuming other people and then just slightly changing their ideas. Whereas actually, when you go off and give yourself a bit of space, go on a walk, which is just quick enough, but your ideas are way more likely to be original. So there's plenty of good reason to just go out on like a fast enough walk, or to go and do a bit of physical activity and then just surrender yourself to what emerges. And on your point of it's really useful, I think, for athletes probably who are listening to this, thinking about transition, is like have a notebook where even if you don't take action on the inspiration or the thought, you can write it down so you can revisit it.
Yeah. How do you consider yourself to be a happy person now?
Yeah, I've always been happy. Mainly.
What do you do to stay at that level? What makes you happy now?
Returning to myself and contributing from that place.
At what age did you realize that could be done? Because myself at 20, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, probably
thinking
probably 30
ways that I do now. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean the part one of most people's lives is a leverage of the external to create a state inside of you. So you're basically using people, things, like the outside world to make you happy. But the trouble with that is that you don't control the outside world. So I use rugby, but then I have a bad game. And so the function that I have used to create my happiness is also the reason why I'm super upset. It's a very like you've got a girlfriend, or this is the person that makes me happy, and then they dump you, or a friend like moves abroad, and you're like, fuck. Like, so the thing that's created happiness is the thing that takes it away. I was lucky that rugby, I loved it. I found a passion, but it did create enormous amounts of low moments. Whereas we not necessarily do it now, but if you just shut your eyes and you think about what you're aware of, and you go, who is aware that I'm aware, and you re-find yourself in that moment, you go, oh, there I am. And you just find this really peaceful place inside of you, and it's available to you the whole time. All the time, you can just, if you slow your life down, you can find that. And it's nothing to do with the external. It doesn't require money. It doesn't require anything else. It's there. And when you understand yourself as that, you don't feel so scared of like, I can't do this because like, in rugby, for example, I was so like using the external that I got scared of getting it wrong. I became this really, well, like,
what do you mean?
Well, I was using rugby to make me happy, but then I'm like, well, then I don't really want to like risk making mistakes, because then I risk not being happy or being seen to be good or whatever it is. It's really about survival, but you end up feeling, you become quite risk averse in your life. Like, well, I don't want to do that because then that might go wrong. But if you send to yourself with your essential self, this unaffected place, which you don't need a lot of self-protection, because you're like, all right, this is who I am. I can go on a podcast and say something goofy and it doesn't change who I am. So then you go into like this, I'm just talking about this experience now. I'm like, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't change who I am, whether I explain something badly or anything like that. And I feel very liberated. I'm happy already within. And then this is an awesome opportunity to talk to a great person, express myself. But I'm not like leveraging, I have to have a good podcast right now, because the external world is the thing that I require to make me happy.
I looked at your website, and the thing that really jumped out at me was authentic self. And I just mentioned how I'm always listening to podcasts, but I was listening to a podcast walking the dog this morning, and someone else mentioned authenticity. I thought, well, I have to bring this up because I think it's something I need to improve on, is my authenticity. Who am I really? When I do this podcast, when I do an intro, I'll stupidly do 5 minutes to get the right intro. I'm like, that's not actually me, you know? And I think that this authentic self, I think, is really important. What if I talk about you, about the authentic self, about being authentic, what does that mean to you? Or why is that important? Why did you write, you wrote on the website about being authenticity. Why did you decide that should be on the part of the...
I'm just taking a moment. The funny thing is, like, I update my website so infrequently that I don't... People go, it's on your website, and I'm like, fuck, I didn't. I didn't see that. And so I might say this, that your task is to be you. And that means expressing, I would probably use this terminology, from your heart. And the word courageous comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. So your task is to be yourself, to say what feels right? Not on like, I have evidence that this is what people are going to like or they're not going to like. Just, this feels right in this moment to express. Okay, from a loving place. Just, okay, this feels right. The reason that we don't do that is because throughout your life, and for tens, thousands of generations, being liked and not failing were vital for survival. If you failed on a hunt, people died. If you aren't liked, you get excommunicated. So there's part of your brain, your ego, which is a thought about yourself. It's conditioned through evidence of what has helped you survive. It creates loads of preferences that make you feel good. So if you aren't aware of what you really want, and you sit in your ego, your separate self, the temptation is to constantly want to be liked and not to fail, even if that doesn't feel in integrity with your, I call it heart's answer. So I want to say this to you, Craig, but I'm worried about what you might think. So then I lose integrity with my. But Adler has a nice way around this. Consider that whose task anything is in life. Right. So we know whose task something is by who deals with the consequences. So It's my task to be me because I have to live with me, right? It's your task to decide what you think of me. Would you agree with that?
Mm.
It's not my task to decide what you think of me, for example. But what we're doing so often in life is manipulating and coercing people on their task. So I'm in this conversation with you. I'm like, part of my brain's like, I need, it talks the language of need. I need Craig to like me. And so I start taking on your task of what you think of me. I start manipulating you by saying things that I think that you'll like. And I completely lose myself. And I'm so away from what feels right in my heart and what I want to say truly. So what do you hear in that? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it is this integrity. It is this kind of, exactly what authenticity is, isn't it? It is kind of pleasing the masses. You're not, you're trying to tell people what they want to hear rather than what you want to say.
It's a lot of pressure, man. It's a lot of pressure to want everyone that you're around to try and control what they think. It's fucking hard. And I tell you what, you won't be saying the things that you truly want to say. You won't be honest. So authenticity for me is understanding, is really tuning into not what this might be another way that would help explain it. Your separate self, your ego, is very, very reactive. So it's loud and it's early in your mind. But if you sit and instead of react to life and respond to life, you'll feel what feels right to say. And it's quite often a bit quieter and a secondary feeling, a secondary voice. It's probably more of a feeling than a specific, you have to say this or you need to. It'll be like, don't know why, not quite sure, because it's not built-in evidence, this answer. You're not built-in evidence. It's just, yeah, that feels right. And so I'm going to say that. Our temptation is like, oh, this worked for me on this. Like, oh, when I spoke to Ben, this question worked. So you might want to ask me a question about something else, but you're like, but Ben, and so straight away your mind's like, well, it's a safe place to go to say this. Like, people will like that, but it's not who you are. So being yourself it takes courage.
And do you think, as an athlete, do you think you talked before about you maybe weren't always, maybe I'm not wording this correctly, but were you authentic as a player? Or you said how you played it safe sometimes, which then kind of was the opposite of what maybe you were as a player. You almost need to be authentic as a player. Do you think other athletes are playing it safe, or do you think what my question kind of is, there's always pressure for athletes to perform. Is there this added pressure on them?
Yes, there is. And did I conform, I guess, is your question in some way. And yes, I did. There's a really big difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. And for large parts of my career, I was more committed to playing not to lose than to playing to win. So it's like I avoid mistakes rather than and let that dictate my behavior rather than expressing what I truly wanted to do. So people will laugh. I'm sure some of my mates were like, fuck you, Cal. But like, I wasn't actually a bad passer. Had a decent offload, good long pass and not a bad kicking game. But like, you could probably count on one hand and two hands how often I kicked in my career. Passing, I didn't my footwork wasn't bad either, and I didn't use any of it because a safe way of me playing rugby was super physical. So I used to like use that all the time. So loads of the time I'd see stuff or I wouldn't even see it because I hadn't opened my mind to it, because I was like, the safest thing to do here is just run it straight and not use your footwork or chuck a pass. Interestingly, but like the start of most performance is a very mind-based, mind-led experience. And as you make mistakes and you don't die, or you do things well and you're like, oh, I can do that. As you create evidence, you actually allow your authentic performance emerges. So you like watch the last 20, 30 minutes of most rugby games and you're like, wow, that's different to the first 10. Because everyone's playing this, I don't want to fuck it up game at the start. And I did that.
Yeah.
So I was explaining to people, I probably played 33%, like the last third of each game, of each training session, in it as my non-conformist self, so to speak. But the trouble with me was I used to get subbed at like 60 minutes. So I'd just be getting good. And then I'd be taken off just before my best bit. That was what. I think it depends as well. France seemed to be, I played over in France like Ben did, and it seemed to be much more about what you're capable of rather than, and so it played a lot more to your strengths. Whereas, and I don't know this to be true of every club or we're talking a while back now, I suppose. But in England, it seemed to be very negatively marked. Oh, Cal, you're playing on the wing, you're not so good at, like, you're not as springy as others in the air. So we're not going to pick you because of that. So it seemed to be quite negatively marked. Like the reason you're marked on the things that you don't do well rather than the things that you do well. And when I got to France, because I didn't speak the language, there wasn't a lot of detail going in. It was just like, we brought you over to do these things, just go and do it. And it really liberated me. And I felt I performed a lot better over there because of that.
Okay, that's interesting. I thought you were going to say actually was going to do the opposite, where you felt you didn't have freedom.
France is much more jouet, like just fucking play. Like you'll watch like they don't. Well, again, my experience of it was they were a lot less detailed, but it really liberated you to explore on the pitch. Whereas in England, it'd be like, you have to get off, you have to run at this shoulder, and we're going to aim for this person. And for me, that became quite limiting, because if you tell me to do something, I'll fucking do it. If I see you in a place of authority quite often. So it'd be like, run at this gap. But then the gap, what would emerge was like a different picture, and I'd be like, well, I'm still going to fucking headbutt this wall. And it was like, wasn't the right thing. So I think I didn't play a heap of my rugby authentically, which I think is perfect, mate. I think it's perfect. It is what it is. Life is always exactly how it should be. And I learned the lessons from that. And now I don't do that shit anymore. Like, people will tell me what they think I should do. Have a feeling, I'll listen, and I'll be like, well, doesn't feel right for me, so fuck it. I'm going to do what I'm going to live in integrity with myself. Is there one question you'd ask me that you'd like love to ask me right now? I don't mind staying on for a couple of minutes if there's just one where you're like, be interested.
No, I'm envious actually that you're so just fucking up for talking about improvement and stuff like that. I think I'm just very, I'm still obviously looking for this kind of, what is my purpose, And it doesn't mean it's going to be this podcast. It could be something in 20 years. So
yeah,
I haven't got a question. I'm just kind of I'm always impressed with, not that I wasn't expecting anything good, but just someone with kind of clarity. I find it very inspirational. It gives me energy as well. And it's something I've been very lucky to speak to, only like 10 people, but very well spoken, and it just gives me energy when I've spoken to someone. So I genuinely haven't got anything that I would love to ask, but
can I share just two thoughts then, according to what you just said?
Yeah, sure.
The temptation when you're trying to find purpose is to lean on clarity and confidence, and I just don't give a fuck about clarity or confidence. I drove back from France for 10 hours it took me in thick fog. I didn't need to know what turn I was going to take in 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. I couldn't see 20 meters in front of me and I didn't need to. I only had to see as far as the headlights would allow me to see and drive into that space and drive into the next space and drive into the next space. And I got home. And that's the same in your journey. You don't need clarity. Just move forward, observe. The trouble with people wanting clarity is it stops them moving at all. But you get clarity through action, not through inaction. And then the other thing I would say is just, I noticed it on the podcast with Ben, courage is much more important than confidence. In your journey of confidence, think about anything you're confident at. Before you were confident, you were competent. To get competent at it, you had to take repeated action. To take action, you needed to have courage to do something you didn't know if you were good at. Confidence is where courage. So courage to take your first action. Courage is the input and confidence is the output. A coach called Rich Litvin taught me that, and it's great because it's so true. Actually, if I want to be confident, then I want to start with, it requires me to start with courage, and the confidence will emerge. You can't, everyone's wanting to click their fingers and be confident. It's bullshit. You can't, if it's that easy, everyone would just be confident. It's not about that. The input is courage. I would say you'd probably enjoy, you probably already know him, but Simon Sinek, Start With Why and Find Your Why would be nice books for you, I think.
It's over there on the shelf.
Yeah. So is it, I think most people go Start With Why. Is that the one you've got?
Yeah.
Have a look at Find Your Why, because they actually give you exercises to help you find it, which may be of interest to you.
Also by Sinek, or?
Yeah, also by Sinek, yeah. I'm under the impression he wrote the first book, and then loads of people were like, yeah, but how do I find out what my why is? And so they wrote a book about finding your why.
I've got a good book list for the podcast now underneath